Hey, okay, so today's lesson video is going to be a little bit different than usual. Instead of working in the book, I'm going to ask you to do this activity that we would do if we were in class. So I need you to actually do this while I'm explaining it through the video because your assignment for today for points will be to take a picture of this thing when you're done with it. So if usually when I say to do things in the video, you just kind of go, and you just keep letting the video play. You don't want to do that today because, yeah, you got to prove that you did this thing. So you want to start by grabbing four pieces of paper. I was lucky enough to have index cards in the house, so I used index cards. But you could just take a piece of paper and cut it into four pieces that are approximately the same size as index cards. That would be fine. And write $100 on one, $150 on another, 160 on another, and 200 on another, and arrange them exactly the way you see on my desk here. Okay, so I want it in this order: 100, then 150 over here, then 160 below the 150, and then 200 over here in the bottom left corner. Okay, so you want to position them like that. So go ahead and uh, pause your video, get those four things made up, and arrange them like you see here, and then unpause it when you got those. Okay, so you should have your four dollar amount cards made, or piece of paper, whatever you're using. I hope that whatever they are, they're not so big that it's going to take up a ridiculous amount of space and you're not going to really be able to take a good picture of it. But at the same time, I hope it's not so small that I'm not even really going to be able to see the picture. So hopefully you're using something about the same size as I am. All right, and now I have four more index cards. And like I said, you could use pieces of paper that are cut to approximately the size of index cards. And what I did is I just drew one line down the middle the long ways, and then two lines the short ways to make six boxes. And notice my line's all squiggly and stuff. I didn't take the time to make it all perfect with a ruler or whatever. You guys are busy enough as it is. It doesn't have to be that perfect. Just poop, poop, poop. Okay, and you're gonna need four of these. All right, so I got my four here, here, and here. There should be six boxes on each one. Okay, 2 rows of 3. So go ahead and pause the video again and get your four these, whatever you want to call these. Okay, so hopefully you have these four cards made up. And so now on each one, what I want you to do is on the first two boxes that are closest to the left-hand side of the card, I want you to draw two arrows, one in each box, and they should be facing away from each other, going to the outer edge of the card. So this one, I'm going to draw up, and then here, I'm going to draw down, okay, toward the long edges of the card. So one's up and one's down. Okay, so then in this card, I'm going to do the same thing. I need an up and a down. And then in this card over here, I'm going to use the smaller boxes for this because you're going to have more stuff to write in the other boxes. So you might as well use the smallest boxes for your little arrows if your boxes aren't all perfectly the same size. And then the last one I did in red, and I'm going to have an up arrow and a down arrow. All right, and then now I'm going to position these between my four money cards so that there's an arrow pointing at the two numbers that the card lies between. So for example, I could put this red card here so that I have an arrow pointing at 100 and an arrow pointing at 150. And then I'll put this card here so that I have an arrow pointing at 100 and an arrow pointing at 200. And then let me put this card here so that I've got, and I suppose it doesn't really matter if your card is sitting like this or like this. It doesn't really matter as long as, I've clearly got an arrow pointing over at the 200 and an arrow pointing at the 160. And then the last one I'll put here, and I've got an arrow pointing at the 150 and an arrow pointing at the 160. All right, so this is the setup of the whole activity, and now your job is to fill this thing out. And fill it out with what? Well, let me grab this one card back over here. I'll show you how to fill this card out, and then your job will be to fill out the other 4 cards. So this card is going to represent the percent change and the math that has to happen to go from 160 to 150. That's what this arrow right here represents, because it's pointing from the 160 to the 150. And also the percent change or the math that has to occur in order to go from 150 to 160. That's what this arrow represents, because it's pointing from the 150 to the 160. And so in each of these rows, we're going to put a couple of things. In this, well, actually I should say column. In this column, in these 2 boxes, we will put the multiplier. This is the number you would have to multiply 160 by to get 150. That number would go here. And the number you would have to multiply 150 by to get 160 would have to go here. Then in this column, we're going to put percent increase, which I'll represent by an arrow up, or percent decrease. I hope that's not confusing, because I'm using arrows here and arrows here. If you prefer better, you could write actually the word percent increase or percent decrease. All right, so my job is to figure out 4 things. What number do I multiply 150 by to get 160? That number goes in this box where it says multiplier, and it has the arrow pointing 150 to 160. Then I need to figure out how much of a percent increase is it to go from 150 to 160. And that number needs to go in the percent increase or percent decrease box here, because it's next to the arrow pointing in the direction I'm trying to go. All right, so let me do that first. What number do I have to multiply 150 by to get 160? Well, if you're thinking algebraically, which I hope you are, essentially what I'm trying to answer is this equation. 150 times some number that we don't know, which we could call x, equals 160. And we solve this equation by dividing both sides by 150, right? So the number I need is going to be 160 divided by 150. So let me get that number. 160 divided by 150 equals 1.06 repeating. So if I wanted to multiply from 150 to 160, being really careful with the arrows, because I almost guarantee you're going to mess this up at some point. I'm going from 150 to 160, so I have to put it in the box next to the arrow that's pointing in that direction. And I'm doing a multiplier here. So the multiplier is going to be 1.06 repeating. Okay, and so now I want to know how much of a percent increase is this? Well, the answer is actually already right here on my calculator for me. Because if I converted, I wonder if you can see these numbers on the calculator. If I converted this 1.06 repeating to a percent, I would move the decimal over 2 spaces. So it would go behind the 0, and then it would go behind that first 6. And I would have 106.6 repeating percent. Or in other words, 160 is 106.6 percent, 0.6 repeating percent of 150. So the increase is just the 6.6 repeating percent part, right? Like the 100% represents the 150. That extra 6.6 repeating percent, that's that additional 10, right? That 10 more I need to go from 150 to 160. So the percent increase in this case, I'm going to draw an arrow. Oh man, you know what? I'm not going to use an arrow because it's going to get too confusing if you guys are using too many arrows. So I'm actually going to write the word increase by 6.6 repeating percent. Another way you could have found that same answer is if you look at it and go, oh, well, I know I need to increase 150 by 10 to get to 160. So how much of a percent of 150 is 10? If you go 10 divided by 150, you get 0.06 repeating, right? And then you move that decimal point over 2 spots and you get 6.6 repeating percent. So 2 different ways to get that same answer. All right, so now let's just do the exact same thing, but the opposite direction. From going, see, we're going to do the other row now, right? We're going to go from 160 to 150. So if I need to know what to multiply 160 by in order to get 150, then I'm trying to answer this question. I'm going, okay, well, 160 times some number equals 150. Well, I need to divide both sides by 160, and I get that number I want is 150 over 60, which is just the exact opposite of what we did in the last one, right? Last time it was 160 divided by 150. This time it's 150 divided by 160. This should feel kind of like finding a K in proportional relationships and stuff. All right, so let me do, I'm trying to do 150 divided by 160. That's going to get me the number I need to multiply this direction. So let's see here, 150 divided by 160 equals 0.9375. Okay, so the multiplier to go from 160 to 150 is 0.9375. And so now I want to know how much of a percent decrease is it to go from 160 to 150. This activity is connected to this warm-up that we did at the very beginning of Monday's video, where I was talking about the fact that the percent increase and decrease in both directions is never the same. Remember, we took this number, decreased it by 30, and we got 7, and then we increased it by 30, and it didn't go back to 10, because percent increases and decreases don't work that well in reverse of each other. You have to use different numbers. And so what I want you to see here is that we're not going to write decrease by 6.6% here. It's going to be a different number to go the opposite direction. Well, you could use this number right here to find the answer. This, if you move the decimal point over 2 spots, is 93.75%, right? Let me make sure you can actually see that. So that means that 150 is 93.75% of 160. So if we just subtract that from 100%, then we'll see what the decrease difference was, right? So I'm going to do 100 minus 93.75. 100 minus 93.75. And I get 6.25%. So that means that to go from 160 to 150 is a decrease of 6.25%. So those numbers, they're close, but they are different. And it should be like that on all these. Well, some of them aren't even going to be close, though. You should always get different numbers here in the decrease and increase boxes. Some of them might be really close like these ones are. Some of them might be wildly different. Like the numbers between 100 and 200, I'm already thinking that, wait, I need to increase 100 by a whole nother 100 to go to 200. So that's going to be like a big percent. But then when I decrease 200 by 100 to get to 100, that's only half of 200. And so the numbers on this one might be way different. All right, so I want you to see if you could fill out these 4 boxes here, these 4 boxes here, these 4 boxes here. This is like your entire activity for the day. So when you've got the rest of these boxes filled out, I want you to take a picture of it and submit it to the assignment that I sent out today that's specifically just for sending me pictures of this. Do not email me pictures. Do not email me pictures. Oh my God, please do not email me pictures. Please upload them to the Google Classroom assignment. I don't really want anyone spending more than like 45-ish minutes per day on math. This video is already 15 minutes long, and I'm sure you took a few minutes to make your cards and stuff. So you're at least 20 minutes into your math time today, right? So if you spend more than another 30 minutes working on this activity, then you can stop. You can stop wherever you're at. You can be like, I'm stuck on this. I can't figure this out in 30 minutes. And take a picture of whatever you were able to accomplish in 30 minutes. And I will give you credit for that. If you finish it in less than 30 minutes, then hey, good for you. You got it done quickly and you got your math done quickly for the day. All right. See ya.